Welcome everyone to our stargazing primer for the months of August and September. My name is Eric McLaughlin. I'm the astronomer for the Rancho Mirage Library and Observatory, and today there's a few areas of the sky we're going to be focusing on, especially including the summer triangle and the area around Sagittarius, where we'll find the center of the Milky Way Galaxy. There's a lot to go into, and we're going to be focused mostly on our evening skies, but there's a few other things we want to touch along the way. So let's go ahead and get started. Let's go ahead and start by getting familiar with how we're going to be talking about our night sky by actually looking at a virtual view of the sky first during the day. Here in a wonderful program called Stellarium, we have a virtual view of our deck and our virtual sky here. This view of the sky allows us to see some things that we normally wouldn't necessarily spot. For example, right now on August 18th, the moon is quite close to the sun here. But these two objects are worth highlighting first because they really tell us what we will be looking at throughout the night. Because, well, the sun, first and foremost, determines when night is. And we are orbiting around the sun, and as such, we can't necessarily see things that are behind the sun. There's always stars up in our sky, the sun, of course, being the brightest of them, and making it hard to see all the stars in these constellations here. Now, the sun appears to move with respect to those constellations along a line called the ecliptic. This line here is really important because, again, we are orbiting around the sun, and as such, this line doesn't just trace out the path that the sun appears to move on with respect to the background stars. It also is essentially the plane of the Earth's orbit, and roughly the plane of the entire solar system. Of course, the Earth isn't oriented in a way that is aligned with the ecliptic. In fact, if we were to take the equator of the Earth and project it into the sky, it would fall right on this line here. This is referred to as the celestial equator, and there's a really important intersection coming up in about a month. On September 22nd, the sun will reach this spot right here, and that will be, for us in the northern hemisphere, the autumnal equinox. It's really important because it will determine how long our nights are. After that point, nights will start to begin to be longer than days, plus a little twilight to make it a little muddied. But nevertheless, that is an important turning point for us with regards to how long our nights end up being. So right now, I'm not going to tell you to go out at night and look for Leo because the sun is up in that part of the sky. And so we'll talk about what we will be seeing in the evenings in just a moment. But starting out right now, I can tell you one thing. Immediately here on the 18th, because the moon is near its new moon phase, since it's between us and the sun right now, that means that tonight is an excellent night to go out and start looking at some stars. So speaking of the moon and its phases, let's actually take a look at our calendar view right now. This calendar allows us to see a lot. This is NASA's SkyCal calendar, and we are already starting on the 18th. You can see we are right at the new moon here, and that means that the moon will not be up at night at all. Over the course of the next few nights, we'll get a wonderful waxing crescent moon in the early evenings until we reach first quarter, where the moon will be at its highest point in the sky right at sunset. It will set close to midnight at that point. A week later, we're going to have our full moon, and ideally, we will aim to right now, we want to highlight the full moon during our swoon at the moon night, so you can actually expect us to have our swoon at the moon that night, barring any conditions making it unable to be viewed for us at that point. Anyway, moving right along though, the full moon will be up all night then. It will rise at sunset and set near sunrise. And moving on into September, we will actually see the moon move into its waning phases, at which point, if you're doing early evening observing, starting on the 7th, you'll actually get, or 6th or 7th, you'll start to get some really good time frame for observing the moon. You might get some good time frame as well, shortly after the full moon, but the full moon does like to rise right when you want to start observing, and so you want to wait a little bit after that point. And moving on into the later part of next month, on the 17th, we'll hit that new moon again. So starting on the 7th all the way through the 17th and getting close to that autumnal equinox we mentioned earlier, that is a great time to be viewing the night sky. So with that said, let's go ahead and switch back over to our evening skies. Now that we are in our early evening skies, shortly after 7:30, we're going to have pretty decently dark skies by that point in August. And again, sunset will happen earlier and earlier over the course of the next month. It'll be gradual, but it will be noticeable nonetheless. And heading towards the highest point in the sky is a wonderful area of the sky. I talked about it a little bit last time. This right here is the summer triangle. It consists of Vega, Deneb, and Altair. These stars are great for spotting all sorts of things in the night sky because they are very easy to spot. They make this really broad triangle that can show us a lot of things, including a few different constellations that are easy to spot. Of course, Lyra up here is where Vega is, and Cygnus is where Deneb is, where Deneb basically translates to tail. It is in fact the tail of Cygnus the swan. You can actually see a bit of a shape here where you have the tail there, the head up here, and big broad wings that way. I mean, you can actually say that some of these illustrations might work for it pretty well. If you don't think that's a decent drawing for a swan, well, Vulpecula means little fox, and yeah, that stick figure is a straight line, so good luck with that. But in any case, there's some really interesting things to see in Cygnus. And one really important one is Albireo, the star right at the head of Cygnus. Albireo is a great object if you got a small telescope. If you do, you can actually zoom in on it and resolve a couple of things here. Again, a couple, though there's actually more than two things here. We have stars A and A, well, let me say it this way. AA and AC are the stars we believe to be here, while this star here is B. Why would I say it that way? Well, there's actually expected to be two stars here, one of which is a K-type subgiant, or sorry, bright giant, not a subgiant, it's bright giant, meaning it's actually a star heading towards the end of its life, and it's actually swelled up and cooled down, which means it appears a bit redder than it otherwise would. It actually is a bit redder than our own sun, and it is really great to contrast the color of the A star with that of the B star over here. The B star is actually a type B star, which is a much hotter, bluer star. It is substantially hotter than our own sun, and that is what makes it bluer. When you actually think about colors in astronomy with regards to star colors, yeah, blue is what is hot and red is what is cool. Red hot, well, that only applies down here on Earth, and we only get close to that with regards to those summer temperatures we've been experiencing over the last few days. But in any case, this is a wonderful target for small telescopes because you can really see that color differentiation in telescopes even better than you can in this program here. Now, other really great things to spot in these constellations in the summer triangle include one of my favorite little objects. It is known by a number of different names. It's known as CR399. It is known as Al-Sufi's cluster. It is known as Barocci's cluster, though it actually is not a cluster. It is in fact this set of stars right here. It's a little bit upside down for how we like to look at it. It is known as the coat hanger, this object right here. And if you don't see a coat hanger, well, let me trace it out for you. It's got a few little stars to really make it out. We've got this set of stars here making out the actual line of the coat hanger, a rod, if you will, and then the hook would go straight up through these stars right here, making a nice little coat hanger shape. At least, you know, a nice little child's stick figure of a coat hanger. It is great to view this object. We normally don't view it at the observatory stargazing because it is actually really big. If you have binoculars, the most basic binoculars, even a camera with any moderate level zoom, point it up at these stars because it is a great thing for low magnification observing. If you're in a dark area, you might see this as a little bit of fuzz on the night sky. And if you really want to spot it though, it is really important to start to figure out where it is. It is actually very easy to find if you know what you're looking at. Again, we are in the summer triangle. We have Vega, Deneb, and Altair. And that little object there, it hangs out right about a third of the way between Altair and Vega, from here down to here. So that is where you can expect to find it, roughly a third of the way between Altair and Vega, almost exactly on that line. So if you have a pair of binoculars, definitely try and go out and spot this object. You don't even need dark skies when you have a good set of binoculars to spot this one. So definitely try and find that object. Now, moving on from the summer triangle, there's a lot to discuss there. We'll visit it again next month. But moving on to the south, we got some objects that are really great to see. Of course, right in Sagittarius, I know I talked a little bit about it last month, we again have this wonderful teapot shape in Sagittarius. The teapot itself, again, being, I'm a little teapot short and stout. All of these stars makes a nice teapot shape. And here is the handle. And here is the spout. And it's not in the song, but there's a lid too. So the teapot shape of Sagittarius is great. The term Sagittarius doesn't have anything to do with a teapot. It actually has everything to do with archery, in particular the archer, which as it's normally drawn for some reason is always a centaur archer. Sometimes it has wings, sometimes it has a cape, depending on how it's drawn. It's a weird thing. Good luck seeing that. I see the teapot. But the teapot is really helpful for finding something hanging out right off the end of the spout, roughly around 26,000 light years in this direction, is again the center of the Milky Way Galaxy, and that big stripe of the Milky Way takes us back through the summer triangle up here. So when you find all of those objects, you can see quite a bit with that. Now, we still have in this area of the sky really good views of Jupiter and Saturn. Jupiter is a bit further away now. It is off closer to, over the course of the next month, it will be on the order of around 643 to 710 million kilometers away. It's moving a bit further away, or rather, we're moving away from it. However, it's substantially closer than Saturn is right now. Saturn is always much further away. It orbits about twice as far away from the sun as Jupiter does. And as such, it is currently around 1,300 to 1,400 million kilometers away. Almost twice the distance there for both indicators. But nevertheless, if you have a decent telescope, you might be able to resolve those rings. I always recommend taking a look. Even with decently powered small telescopes, you can see those rings pretty well. Likewise, if you're looking out in this part of the sky, take a look back at Jupiter and try and match Galileo's discoveries of those moons out there. From night to night, those moons will move quite dramatically. So you definitely want to be keeping an eye on those if you want to see a lot of dramatic views. Anyway, back to the 18th now. And so, yeah, always a good idea to take a look at Jupiter and Saturn. Now, I mentioned the ecliptic earlier as being the plane of the Earth's orbit and roughly the plane of the solar system. Again, that is why we see Jupiter and Saturn right there. They orbit very close to that line as well. Hanging out near Sagittarius is another constellation called Scutum, and up in Scutum is a really cool object. It is known as M11 because it is in Charles Messier's Not a Comet catalog, and thus it is Under certain conditions might look like a little fuzzy dot, but Scutum is Latin for shield. If you imagine those Roman shields, those big rectangular tower shields, those are referred to as Scutum specifically. But M11 is known as the Wild Duck Cluster, and it is a great object for a good telescope. It really is a nice, dense, open cluster of stars. An open cluster of stars is a relatively young set of stars. This one is on the order of around 6,200 light years away, and its diameter is about 25 light years across. The estimated ages of this can range around 220 million years old, which is pretty young as far as stars go. And I highly recommend trying to spot this one. It is a great one if you got a good telescope for it. Another great object over in our southern skies is known as M8. It has that designation because it's also in Charles Messier's Not a Comet catalog, but it is a very different object. It is known as the Lagoon Nebula as well. So we'll swing on over to it. Hanging out down in Sagittarius, it is a neat object to try and spot. It can be a little bit of a challenge if you don't have very good magnification and light collecting ability. And I will note, if you're looking at this thing directly, you will not see this red color. I always have to emphasize that because your eyes don't work in a way that actually will reveal color as quickly as dim light. So you can expect, if you spot this object, to see it as sort of a almost black and white, or even a bit bluish, the way your eyes might interpret it. That's because you have two different types of cells in your eyes, rods and cones, and the rod cells are dedicated to detecting light, while the cone cells are color sensitive. However, they are less sensitive than the rod cells, so you see light before you see color. And so, yeah, this object is a great one to spot. I recommend using lower magnification, and by that I mean don't go over 100 times magnification when looking at this object. That will help you see a bit broader of a field of view here. So highly recommend spotting that one as well. There's a lot of great things up in our night sky, and many of them, like what we see here, we can spot very frequently throughout the night. And other objects, however, you kind of have to catch really quickly. Those include some fun objects that we put up there. Always like to highlight every year, or every month rather, our friendly flybys of the International Space Station. The International Space Station will be flying over quite often. However, you might need to get up early for it, and sometimes it may not be the best. This is a view of CalSky, a great website. There are a number of these, also Heavens Above and others will give you this information as well. This highlight over the next month, I'll swing through pretty quickly because there are a lot of flyovers and not all of them are great. So when you want to spot a good one, take a look over at these objects. These are really a top-down view of our sky, as it were, looking down at the ground. And this is the path that the International Space Station will appear to fly over. If you want to spot it really well, you'll want it to be up rather high in our sky, kind of like this one on the 22nd. This is a decent flyover. It also helps to check another number in here. There are numbers followed by the word mag, that is short for magnitude. It is a way of measuring brightness in astronomy, and the more negative the number, the brighter the object. So you want really low numbers here. So if we got minus 2.7 mag, that is pretty bright. And so this object, or this flyover, is a great time if you want to get up at around 5:30. You can spot it pretty well there. Again, that is on Saturday, August 22nd, and you will actually be able to spot it moving up from the southwest, passing decently high overhead and moving over to the northeast. How high overhead? Well, it gets up to 41 degrees above our horizon, which is decently high. It's not halfway between straight up and the horizon, but it nevertheless is high enough to spot pretty well. And so as we glance through here, you can spot a number of good ones. The 23rd flyover's okay. The 24th has a really good one at minus 3.7. That magnitude caps out close to minus 4, so that will be a very bright one. However, as highlighted here, it will be in twilight hours, so it will start getting brighter and eventually won't be all that visible. Likewise, at 4:50 on the 25th, the sky is going to be a bit darker, and you can actually see sometimes the International Space Station will basically appear in our night sky because it will come out of the Earth's shadow, and it might even come out looking a little red as it passes through light scattered from, well, at that point will be sunrise. And so you can watch sunrise on the International Space Station from the comfort of the ground if you're willing to get up at 4:50 in the morning. Again, around 4.2, that is going to be as bright as you can really ever expect the International Space Station to be. There will be some evening flyovers in the next month, but you got to be patient for it. It's all orbital mechanics and timing to make all of these work out. So always a good idea to go and check all these times out for yourself. Again, you can go to CalSky and set up this output as well. So highly recommend doing that. I'm just going to finish scrolling through all of these so you can get a glance at what might be some good days and times to spot the station. Feel free to pause the video on anything that looks interesting to you at this point. And we come right up to our autumnal equinox right here, again on the 22nd. So there's a lot going on in our night sky. And with that, we're going to start wrapping up right here. There will be a lot to talk about as we move on into next month, because we will be getting closer to spotting Mars in the early evening, as well as a number of other objects as our sky shifts and the sun moves with respect to those background stars. So thank you again for being here.
And that's all we have for this month's Stargazing Primer. Special thank you to the Rancho Mirage Library and Observatory Foundation. It is through that foundation that we're able to provide all sorts of interesting programming here at the library and observatory. So if you're interested in looking into that foundation, I recommend checking out our website linked below. And also, if you want more information, sign up for our eNewsletter, also linked below. If you want to get more content right here, please subscribe, and we look forward to seeing you next time. Have a good night and keep on looking up.